Borodar, everyone. Good morning. I'm Emma Good, Cost of Living Crisis Project Manager at One Voice Wales. Thank you for joining us this morning and welcome to today's Council's Connect session. In these sessions, we hope to encourage community and town councils across Wales to come together to share experiences, ideas and challenges in supporting your residents through the ongoing cost of living crisis. Today's session will focus on a key area that many councils are grappling with currently around funding, grants and council precepts. And with the increasing demand for services and support, securing financial resources has never felt more critical. So we'd like to spend the first part of the session today looking at general strategies around funding and accessing grants, and then move on to a discussion that focuses a little more around council precepts. We are joined today by several One Voice Wales team members to support today's discussion, including our chair, Mike Theodulou, and our chief executive, Paul Egan. Deputy Chief Executive, sorry, Paul. Also joining us are several councils who have experience in accessing funding and who have consulted with their communities to raise their precepts to fund services, projects and initiatives. There will be many more of you who have valuable experience in this area, so we would encourage you to participate and share. You can get involved by raising your hand to speak up via your Zoom controls or by dropping your thoughts and questions into the chat. Today's session is due to run for an hour and a half, but there has been a lot of interest, so we're happy to keep the session open longer to facilitate further discussion if that should be needed. And we'd like to position this as the start of a conversation. We're happy to arrange follow-up sessions and resources should we identify areas together that require further discussion. So I'd like to start today's session by introducing Jeff Warren, Clerk to LLanddulas and Rhyd Council, who will be sharing their council's journey in creating a strategy and approach to securing funding around strengthening social cohesion in their community. The council, through a well-structured plan, has managed to engage residents, form partnerships and secure key funding that has driven positive change. So, Borodar, Jeff.
Apologies to everybody if I'm actually going to teach anybody to suck eggs. That's certainly not the intention. What I'd like to do is just talk through something that I was involved in for the last 18 months that's been quite beneficial to the community as regards funding and resource, and to share that with you to see if you can pick anything up from it if it's useful. It's probably best just to start from the beginning. I've only been the clerk for 2 years in the council, and one of the priorities when I first joined was to look at a potential place plan to bring the two villages together. Post-lockdown, the villages Llanhilleth and Foel are very close to each other, but do not really associate with each other, particularly after the lockdown problems. So the idea was to devise a place plan and to cost that out to try and bring those villages together. For that, obviously, we identified the key contacts we need to contact locally, stakeholder-wise. We constructed a survey, both online and paper-based, and circulated that. And then we also held a town communication meeting, which the councillors facilitated, with flip chart to iPad access for further feedback on our questions and responses about what they wanted us to do. It was very clear after that review that the process we identified was probably going to be too big for us. We're only a small council with £38,000 precept, and it was probably too big at that stage. So what we decided to do was identify the 5 priorities from the survey and then focus on those. This was called a 5 to drive plan, and it consists of the following: communication, access to open spaces, speeding road safety, village cohesion, which is very important, dog fouling and fly tipping, and that is all now part of our annual report. Because at that time we had 10 councillors, we divided those into 5 groups to focus on the delivery, and obviously updated our website and notice boards with the message about what we were attempting to do. We also had a project budget already identified as part of the precept, a small amount to increase the precept for the following year to support any resource or funding opportunities that might come our way. But it was very clear that that wouldn't be enough. And what we couldn't do was put in more pressure with the cost of living crisis we're all experiencing on the local residents. So it was important to look at additional funding streams to support the precept. And as I'd had previous experience in a previous life with the National Lottery, I identified them first and headed the project bringing Llanhilleth and Foel together, initiated that, which focused on the social cohesion part of our 5-point plan. It was fantastic a month or so later to find I'd been successful and secured £2,500. We immediately arranged a stakeholder meeting thereafter and identified the King's Coronation Day as being the social cohesion opportunity to bring the villages together. From that, miraculously, a village people volunteer group was created who identified their own terms of reference and the way of working. They organised the Coronation Day event, but it was supported by the 2 councillors I mentioned earlier as part of the focus group. Over 200 people attended that event, and the Village People is now a permanent group, organising a number of events locally in partnership with the church, the community centre, and the British Legion. More recently, they've identified a summer wipeout, where it's been involved with a lot of children locally, a lot of party games, etc. And although we're in the early stages, there is definitely a change in attitude in the villages demonstrated by the funding support from the National Lottery. We've now identified further funding streams and they're in progress. But in summary, what I'd like to say to you all is that the primary reason for this was to facilitate and empower other people. It certainly was never the intention for the council to be in charge of it, because obviously that's very difficult to do with our councillors and their volunteer capability. It's very simple to commit something and not deliver it. So it was very much trying to drive other people. And the village people are the ones that do that now, one group. And I would say that by just this simple attention to actually buying the right funding has given us this opportunity to actually develop it further. So that's everything for me, unless there's any questions.
Thanks, Jeff. Are there any specific questions that people may have for Jeff? If you could raise your hands via your Zoom controls. I think did I see David Court?
Yeah, I'll just ask about this survey. I've been pointed myself towards the Cardiff Research Group for the survey work they do down there. Did you make the survey up yourself? How did you go about doing that? And what was the sort of response rate to it?
Thanks, David. Yes, we did devise it ourselves. Very simple question answer about things, trying to probe the answers. And as in most surveys, I'm sure you probably know yourself, David, the return rate is not massive. It's about 28 to 30% response, which is why the town meeting was called after to support it and get more buy-in. I think as well, just to re-emphasise, we tend to find that people are a little bit more apathetic at the moment and probably don't respond as we'd like them to. But this was just a first stage. So we have to go with something. And I think if we were to do it again, which we probably will be doing next year, to find out exactly how that was developed further. But yes, we devised it ourselves. Okay,
thank you.
There are a couple of questions in the chat, Jeff. If you wouldn't mind picking those up. Well, one was what were the villages, and can you list the 5 points in the plan, please?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The villages were Llanhilleth and Foel. It's the same council, but they're slightly only about a mile or two apart. But they are divided from a rural area. And the 5 points that came from the survey as a priority to address were access to open spaces, speeding and road safety, village cohesion, dog farming and fly tipping, and communication. They were the 5 points.
And then a final question is, actually there's a few more, but how many villages are in your village? How many villages are in your village people volunteer group, and what is their average age?
There's now 12 in the group, and obviously it has a chair of the group, and they range from about 25 to 75. So there is a cross section of people, although I would add that the villages I represent are primarily, they are more the elderly kind of category. We are one of the most elderly categories in Conwy.
Did I see Yeah, Bob Campbell's got a physical hand up. Hi, Bob. Do you have a question?
Hi. Yes, hi, good morning. Bob Campbell, Risca
Morning.
Town Clerk. Yes, thanks, Jeff. Do you have your own property at your council? Or, in other words, where do your 200 people meet and hold your event?
There's 3 or 4 different parts of the village that we can use. The one area that we used for this particular meeting was the village hall to actually get the meeting originally. But the 200, we have a playing field area, which is at the top of the village. But we also have what's called the glebe, which is a area around the church that is an open recreation area. And basically that's where that came from. The event was primarily there with the church input.
Yeah, just I'm not going to talk necessarily about what Jeff's explained, but I think it's a good thing that you've done in your community, Jeff. But I think the audience should be aware that if you want to get volunteers more actively involved with the council, that's one way of achieving it. There is another way. You have the power under the Local Government Act 1972 to appoint non-councillor representatives on advisory committees. That is quite a good way of getting people, if you like, directly linked to the work of the council. They could be part of the volunteer strength as well. The other thing is, it could actually enhance democratic health, because when people get caught in with the good work councils are doing, it might spur them on then to consider standing for election when vacancies arise. The other point is, grant funders will demonstrate for you exactly what their criteria is. First of all, you check whether you're eligible. You then need to look at their criteria because you need to match up yours with theirs. And I think having a survey, even if it's not quite as statistically reliable as you'd like, is a very good way of convincing funders that this is an investment that's worth spending some money on. So I think what you've done is very merit-worthy.
Hi, thanks very much. It's just a quick question to Jeff. Is your village people group constituted as a separate group, or does it come underneath the town council remit?
Yeah, hi, Jane. It's a separate group, Jane.
Yeah, that's great. So did they actually bring the money in through their group, or did you get it as a town council?
The initial funding, there were 2 areas. The initial 2.5K was earmarked to go towards that project of bringing together with the lottery being communicated to that effect. So that money came from it. But they also generated additional funding themselves by the event itself. So obviously there's very strict controls, as you know, about where that money goes and where it comes from. Of course. Yeah.
Oh, that's great help. Thank you. It's just reassuring because that's the route that we tend to go down. So thanks very much for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane.
Thanks very much, Jeff. I just had a bit of a follow-up, actually. You mentioned that moving forward now that your council sort of business as usual process is to look for additional funding sources. Would you be able to speak to that briefly about how you go about that? Because I know that that's a key difficulty in terms of finding funding and grants that are able that town and community councils can actually apply for. Have you got any advice around that? Or anyone else on the call?
Sure. What's crucial is one of the contacts we have through the local community centre has herself a lot of contacts with a website which identifies different funding for different areas, which comes through. But also because I've been part of the Conwy business kind of partnership as well in Clandino Junction, they also are regularly updating you by email with additional funding opportunities, which, to be fair, Emma, aren't always what you need and what they come, but it's worth looking at. So I will try and get the details of the website for those that don't know and get it to you about where they can access to see what funding is for what areas.
That's great. Thanks, Jeff. We've just dropped some resources in the chat as well. Vanessa from our team has dropped the link to Funding Cymru, which is a really useful tool for searching for funding opportunities. You may or may not be aware of that. And also, very useful comment from Heidi saying county voluntary councils in your local area have funding advisors. And again, mentioned funding Wales. So if you need any more resources around that, just get in touch with us and we can make sure that we provide them. I'd like to now bring in Cathy Kennedy, if I could, who is the clerk to Cowbridge Town Council, who's got a little presentation for us today to talk about Cowbridge's approach to funding, with a particular focus on how they've used and raised their Precept. So good morning, Borodar, Cathy.
Thanks for inviting me along this morning. This really came on the back of some comments I made at the One Voice Wales inquiry meeting the other week, and Angela asked me if I could talk about why over the last 3 years we've raised the Precept quite substantially in Cowbridge. Some of the things that kind of surprised me when I started there were how little responsibility for community events that Cowbridge Town Council actually took on. And the reason for that is not because they didn't want to, although I'm sure that went down well with some people, but more because they didn't have to. They had the overview is that the Precept increased from 200 to 300,000 over 3 years. This kind of coincides with my clerking period, so I think some people think it's my fault, but obviously I don't make the decisions. We're going to look at the historical context of the Precept changes, the key areas of increased spending, and how we went about public engagement and community benefits as well. So it's not so much about the cost of living, it's more about why we had to up the Precept. So as I said, several years, I didn't say this, I'm going to say it now, several years pre-COVID, I was told by previous councillors, and of course I looked back, was that there was little or no increase in the Precept every year. The council who were there then kind of took quite a lot of pride in not raising the Precept. And I do get this to a certain point, but as everybody will know, it comes a point when if you don't raise the Precept at all, that you're going to get into some difficulties, which is really what happened, because you need necessary adjustments, don't you, to fund any growing responsibilities and community needs. And, you know, things do change a lot. So we have a Grade 2 listed building in Cowbridge, just where the town hall offices are, where I'm based most of the time. And we hire out the halls, we have weddings there, we have a big chamber where we have our meetings. And not a lot was done to that Grade 2 listed building for quite some years. So when I started, the roof was leaking. It still is in some areas. It's such a big roof. We haven't been able to get it all done at once, but there's leaky roofs. We needed a new heating system. We've got 3 boilers. We've got 2 domestic boilers and 1 commercial boiler. And they all broke at the same time, roughly, you know, coincidentally. So we had to replace them. A lot of this had to come out of our reserves, which luckily at the time we did have quite decent reserves. In fact, decent because the auditor did question it my first year there. So as you can imagine, maintenance and preservation of a building like that, and if you've ever seen Cowbridge Town Hall, it is quite big and there's lots of different aspects to the roof as well. It's costly. For the last 4 years, these are the new responsibility that town council has taken on. So I had whisperings in my first year there that Cowbridge in Bloom, they were an elderly group of people who'd been getting the fire service in Cowbridge to put up the baskets and water them throughout the year with a big heavy bowser pulling it up and down the street. And it was getting to the point they didn't have enough volunteers, and they came to the council and they said, look, we're not going to have any flowers if you don't take it over. So in 2022, I think it was, lose track of the years, we took hanging baskets. So obviously a couple of £1,000 a year, all the watering, that kind of thing. The famous Christmas parade, the reindeer parade, happened pre-COVID. Obviously, COVID stopped a lot of things happening. After COVID, the main instigators of that, some of the local traders and the Chamber and Trade in general, said we can't do it anymore. It's too expensive and we haven't got anyone to do that. So it didn't happen until last year. So 21-22, when I was there, we had no parade. But last year we did bring back the Cowbridge parade. It's not a live reindeer parade. We're not allowed to do that anymore because the Vale Council won't give us any money to do it if we use live animals. So we have a fabulous big LED Lumi reindeer now. And we've had funding from the Vale to do that, but we've also funded it ourselves. This year we built on it even more. We're having Christmas markets, which we're funding. It's over 2 days instead of 1 day, because the one thing we noticed last year was that it was just the parade. There wasn't really much in between. Then we had the Christmas light switch on later in the evening. People were like wandering around the town, we're going, well, there's nothing going on. So this year we've built on it and we've got Christmas markets around the town and the road closures all day. That's a heck of a lot of money. The road closure itself is 10,000 because this includes all the barriers and everything. It's not money to the Vale. The Christmas lights are on hire, and now we spend around about 15, 20,000 on Christmas lights a year as well. So there's that. So now we've took on May Day. It was fab last year. We did a party in the park, music stalls and entertainment. We actually based that on, we did a coronation event for the King's coronation, and that went down so well. And everybody in the community was saying, well, can't we do something like that every year? So we thought, yeah, May Day. So that's what we're doing. We've got the King's coronation. Placemaking, we've Cowbridge are working very closely. I think they're the pioneer in the Vale with placemaking. One of our councillors is leading on that. It hasn't actually cost us anything yet, but I have heard that we might need to put something in the budget for next year. And we've got a draft placemaking plan coming out on the 7th of November. Remembrance Sunday, when I started, obviously it was one of the things that as soon as we could get back to Remembrance Sunday, we did Remembrance Sunday. We have a road closure and we have a march to the Holy Cross Church. The council oversees it all. The British Legion are there. They do a little, but we pay for it all and we do it all at the council, which kind of surprised me, but that's the way it is. Pre-COVID, the road closures were always done by volunteers. And the first year when I was there, we did it using volunteers because that's the way it had always been done. So the Vale told us as well that we wouldn't be able to have any more road closures if we didn't do traffic management. So that's another 2,500 a year for Remembrance Sunday and Mayor's Civic Sunday. And of course, the Christmas parade, which is 10,000 because that's an all-day closure as well. So that's all extra things we've spent on since COVID and since I've been the clerk in Cowbridge. The town hall refurbishment, we've got a massive project on now because we realise so much of the town hall is falling apart a little bit, the roof, and we had to replace a door not long ago, locks, things like that. We're hoping to get monies from S106, and we've been speaking to Lottery and Heritage Lottery funding about that, so we're hoping to get monies from all that. So as yet, we haven't spent an awful lot on it. We've spent some consultancy fees and things, but not too much, but still quite a bit really. In the scheme of things, another £5,000, £6,000, £7,000. Increased grant funding for local community groups. The grant pot was quite small in Cowbridge when I started, and my experience in Llanhilleth was they give money left, right and centre to all the community groups going. So I pushed that because there are a lot of community groups. Yes, Cowbridge is known as quite a wealthy area, but at the same time, there's a lot of community groups that need our support. The Scouts, the Guides, the football, the Amateur Dramatic Society who need a new roof and things like that. So we've upped the grant pot and we give more money now to community groups, which is great, because that's something that town and community councils need to be doing. It also brings us closer to those local organisations and it strengthens that community cohesion. So before I started, it was 2 part-time staff. When I started, it was 2 full-time staff in the office. One of the councillors who during COVID had taken on a lot of the clerk responsibilities because they didn't have a clerk at that point, saw what really, it opened her eyes, basically. She saw what was needed. I was brought on full-time deputy clerk, a full-time amenity supervisor and a part-time caretaker. We've upped that now to 3 full-time staff and 2 part-time. So we now have a full-time clerk, a full-time deputy clerk, a part-time community engagement officer, which unfortunately we are looking to refill the position, but it's fantastic having a community engagement officer, and it's been really, really great. We've been able to do so much in the past 9-10 months with the community engagement officer. So we are aware of the cost of living crisis, and it comes up in discussions every year when we're doing the budget. We've already met 2 or 3 times on the draft budget. I'm pleased to say we're well ahead of ourselves this year. Every year, the Precept increase is carefully considered to avoid that undue financial pressure on residents. We do have public consultations. The face-to-face ones, they're not really well entertained. We open the chamber, we sit in the chamber with a couple of councillors, sometimes I'm there, and invite people along. We don't get many people coming. We obviously use Facebook. We also use Instagram. I don't know how many people follow that. And we've got our website and we put things on the notice board. I think this year we're going to probably hold more public consultations. I think the lesson learned from previous years is that we need to hold them at different times, different days. So weekend, evening, day, maybe 3 or 4 of them to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to attend those public consultations to talk about why we're raising the Precept. There are great benefits. I mean, there is negativity. There's always negativity, unfortunately. They're usually ex-councillors, dare I say, that come back and say, why are you raising the Precept so much? People can't afford it and that. But then majority of the town will come back and say to us, we do engage a lot now with the town and say how wonderful it is having the parade back, the Christmas parade. They know it's going to be better and bigger this year and over 2 days instead of only 1 day. Oh yeah, there's Santa's Grotto. Oh, that's fantastic. How lovely it is to have the lights and the summer baskets, and the May Day event really went down a treat. You know, so you've got to put it into perspective as well. What sometimes seems like a massive increase, even over 3 years, that type of increase, it's not. Most people don't notice it. A few people notice it, but most people don't notice it. But what they do notice is all the stuff that we do for the town, and they're much more aware that there's a town council in the town now, and we've got more engagement from them. Many appreciating the council's efforts as well. So we have seen a lot more positive feedback recently. Community cinema, that's something we're bringing back as well. Pre-COVID, there was a big screen, they called it, and that went pear-shaped during COVID, and the projector broke, so it's taken us some time to get that back up and running. I'm pleased to say we've just had a lottery grant of 8,500 to get that back up and running. So the thing is, the next issue now is who's going to run it. So, you know, I would really recommend, if you're looking at getting S106 monies at any point, to try and get a working group together, or community type committee that Paul was talking about, and get, you know, the S106 officer of your council to attend that if you can. I think that is the way forward. So the increase in the Precept has been necessary to address the long-standing infrastructure needs. Without the increase in the Precept, we wouldn't have been able to keep the town hall fit for purpose. It's hired out every day. We've got so much going on there. We've got ballet lessons, Welsh lessons, baby yoga, Zumba, pantomime over Christmas, lots, weddings in the chamber, lots and lots going on, and there's not a day where there's not something going on in the town hall. We want to continue engagement with residents. That will absolutely remain a priority. It's really important. I remember my first year as a clerk, actually, when I did my Silka, Paul was my trainer, teacher, and one of the things he used to say a lot was they're really encouraging councillors to get, if they can afford it, to get a community engagement officer. And since January is the first time I've ever had one in to work with, and it's been fantastic. It really has, and I think we've, you know, not taken on so much more, but raised our profile, our positive profile, so much more since.
Jane Neal has her hand raised with the question. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Jane.
Thanks very much. I just want to pick up on a couple of things really that Cathy's shared. A fascinating presentation and really heartening, because I felt like you were telling our story, because that responsibility to take on all those activities has come our way as well since COVID and since the changes to some of the legislation around Christmas lighting and things like that. So it's really fascinating from that point of view. What I would like to say, there's a couple of points that I'd like to pick up on. One is the consultation opportunities, and those are physical consultation opportunities. One thing that we've developed in Llanhilleth is food and artisan markets that run on a monthly basis. We got initial funding in from town centre funding. So they were funded for 18 months for free. So we could get the suppliers in and not charge them for stalls. And that was really good because it got us going really well. But from a consultation point of view, they've been really invaluable, because every month town council can have a stall to explain what's going on or consult with anything that we need to find out. So just a note on that it hasn't cost us a lot of money to do the food and artisan markets. We have brought in a worker to run them, but it's quite low cost, and I would really recommend it. It's something to look at if you're in a position to. We are lucky that we also have a hall that we can run them in, so that really works well. The second point I'd like to make is that quite early on when I started, I've been there 6 years now, when I think second year in, we developed an activity that was similar to your party in the park, I think, but we branded it Llanhilleth Celebrates, and it's worked very well because it changes day each year. Sometimes it's in June, sometimes it's in August, just depends when something comes up. What it allows us to do is to link it with something that we want to celebrate. So this year we had massive job on at the mugger pitches. We've refurbished the mugger pitches with help from Cymru Football Foundation and SPF money. And so we were able to hold an event that was branded Llanhilleth Celebrates, that everybody knows, but actually link it to the mugger this year. And we tend to link it with the different activities each year. So it's just useful to have a flexible event that can move around the calendar, really. But I was really interested in your story, Cathy, and it's very reassuring to hear other people on the same journey, because sometimes I think it's really challenging as a town council, and particularly as a clerk, to wonder whether you're actually going in the right direction. So it was really reassuring that. Thank you very much.
Good, glad it was helpful. Bit of a leap of faith, but we're getting there.
Andrew has a question. Hi, Andrew.
Hi there, Andrew from Gorsainen Town Council. First of all, Cathy, well done on the presentation. It's really good. I got friends and family in Cowbridge, and they're very happy with the environment up there. So that's a plus, especially for my family. They do like to moan. But I would go back to the Precept increase. We've in our council, we've got a bit of a divide that people feel cheeky, councillors feel cheeky about asking for extra on the Precept, and and they hold it back as little as possible. But we've got a new fresh wind of community engagement, and we obviously need to financially back that up. The 100,000 increase over 3 years, I think, is quite sensible. But any tips on justifying that to the naysayers?
I will say most of our naysayers, well, certainly the ones that come out openly about it, are ex-councillors, and most of the ex-councillors that were on the council pre-COVID, and the ones that stopped the Precept being raised in the past, and they go on Facebook and they try and drum up lots of hype. You know, they'll go on Facebook and say, what are they doing? They're doing this and they're doing that, and they're paying too much money to the staff, and who does she think she is, that chief executive, you know, self, and all this kind of thing, and they really wind it up. And it's been horrible, actually. We were going to the bullying sometimes, but there's been quite a lot of bullying and things like that there. However, it's only a few of them. It's only the minority. And most people ignore them now anyway, because they see them as always ranting on Facebook. So it's generally gone quiet. I'd say if you've got that kind of complaining, just ignore it, if it's just general ranting. But obviously you do have to justify honestly and why you're doing it. So yeah, I would say do spreadsheets. This is something I did last year and I'm going to do this year when we did Christmas, because it was the first time we did the Christmas parade. I had a spreadsheet. It was very simple. It was just basically the expense, what we spent and what we spent it on, and how much the reindeer was, how much the grotto was, and how much came from the Vale, because we wanted to show the community as well, because there was a lot of complaining from the usual people that there was no live reindeer, and they were blaming me personally or us generally and that kind of thing. And we were saying, well, we can't have live reindeer because without the funding from the Vale, the parade wouldn't go ahead. So that all went on the spreadsheet, and we published that spreadsheet and published, I think I might have even got in the local Glamorgan Star, but I definitely put it in the local hub, on the notice board, and that this is what we spent the money on, this is how much money we got from the Vale, and this is what we intend to next year. And what's been really helpful as well is the working group. We've got a wonderful community event working group. It's really built up for the last 2 years. There's quite a lot of the traders on there, a lot of the local entertainers and that kind of thing. And I noticed something on Facebook just the other day, somebody complaining, and that they did actually say, when they said, why isn't there live reindeers? This person came on, who I don't know actually, so it wasn't an ex-councillor, and just said, because somebody in the office doesn't like life ranger, but one of the working group came on and said, well, actually, that's not true, and this is how it is. So it's getting the community involved to explain to the rest of the community, because the community will listen to other community members probably more than they would the clerk or the other councillors. And it's just being totally transparent, really, getting out then, not just saying we need more money because we need more staff and we need Christmas lights, actually showing them how much we're spending on the Christmas lights. And, you know, they can go and look at the minutes, but who wants to go and troll through minutes on websites for hours looking for that information? You want to give it to them, you know, maybe even hold a consultation outside your post office or the local Greggs or something, you know. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. It's yeah, because you know, I think a lot of them are wary of the double taxation situation. And there's a bit of guilt there, but then I think there's a wariness of having a political advantage of saying we've held the precept at this, but of course with that stagnation comes funding issues as well. So yeah, that does help. Thank you very much. Cheers.
You're on mute, Emma.
And I can see you have a question. I can also see that Janet how you've got your hand up as well. So I will come to you, Janet. Can I take Jane's question first?
Yeah, hello, it's Jane Crode from Old St Man's Community Council. Thank you very much. That was a great presentation. Thank you very much. It was really helpful. Can you or anybody else suggest, at the moment in Old St Man's Community Council, there are 9 councillors and there's a clerk and an RFO. And we're finding it quite difficult. We've got a new chair who's very proactive. But the transition of trying to get, you know, we are trying to get from just councillor led. So all the events, basically, the councillors are meant to volunteer to do everything. And clearly that isn't working. So can anybody give some ideas of how you get from the point that the councillors aren't expected to do anything, and you can kind of spread the either the pool of ideas to generate more ideas and to get more people involved, because we're kind of we've got lots of ideas, but the problem is we've got 9 councillors and our age profile is quite high, so people are doing less and less, and it's the same everywhere, you know. So we did have quite a lot of active groups before COVID, but we're sort of in a kind of situation that it's all on the councillor's head. So the few of us that kind of are quite active end up doing everything, and we can't take on everything. Anybody else got a situation? And you know, increasing the precepts is one thing, but you know, what's the best way to go about either increasing our staff numbers or whatever? Who's done that successfully? Apart from obviously Cowbridge have done it very well.
Did you want to know how to get more community engaged or more staff? I'm not quite sure what you're asking, sorry.
So it's how we get from the situation at the moment. We've got 9 councillors with a high age profile. We've got part-time clerk and a part-time RFO. So, and they don't have that much spare time to be involved in participating with the community. So at the moment, any ideas such as, you know, Christmas carol singing, etc., you know, lots of things that you mentioned, we would like to participate in. But at the moment, everything we do, the councillors have to actually organise. And it's how we get from the situation, and therefore raising the precepts, because we've got a very low profile, obviously. So how do we sort of, you know, what has anybody got any idea of? Because Cowbridge is a much bigger council than us.
We had a base to go on as well. The way we started was we have an invite list for Remembrance Sunday. We have an invite list for Civic Sunday, and we started with those, used who we thought was appropriate. Obviously, maybe not the local bagpiper, but generally, we had, you know, lots of past mayors, community group people like the WI, the scouts, the guides, the brownies, the local church representatives, allotment representatives, all our community hire people who hire our hall. We had them. We emailed them all, went out to them all, and we said, look, we're starting this community working group. also, even though the Chamber of Trade aren't particularly active anymore, they still exist and they have a WhatsApp group. So one of our councillors who's on that group invited them to come. So we do have a couple of those members, and we have a few of the local shops. We've got a few quite active. We've got the pencil kids that do school uniform, and they get really involved in some of the arty stuff with the school and that. So we did have a base to start with, and it kind of just snowballed from there. We got one particular community member, his name's Alan, and he's brilliant, and he pushes everything for us on Facebook, and he's a local photographer guy and everybody knows him. So you need people like that. You need those influences within the community. But maybe there's somebody else on who's in a smaller community, that because you might not have those lists I've got to start with, if you've got anything like that, I'd say start there, but maybe somebody else can advise.
Thanks. That's great though. That's somewhere to start. Get lists of people. That's very useful. If anybody else has got any ideas, I'd be really grateful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and if anyone's got any further ideas for Jane, just drop them in the chat, and then we'll make sure that they're distributed after. Jeanette, you had a question.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Thanks, Cathy. It was two questions really. I think on top of your precept, do you have you had to tap into your reserves to pay for some of those essential repairs that you mentioned, etc., or not?
Yes, we did originally. So during COVID, I think there was quite a lot of money that wasn't spent. There wasn't much happening, I guess. And although we did sort of pay for that in a way, because we have quite a bit of income from the town hall as well, about, off the top of my head, I think it's about 15,000 a year from the town hall on top of the precept. But the first year or two I was there, so I'm talking like 21 and 22, when we were having big storms. We're always having storms, aren't we? But these storms were making the roof leak. We had to tap into a reserve to get emergency repairs done to the roof, to pay for the boilers, because none of that had been budgeted for, because the boilers all just suddenly broke at the same time. So yes, we did. But luckily at that point, our reserves were probably too healthy. As I said, the auditor my first year said, why have you got so much in your reserves? And I said, well, because we've got a listed building, and he accepted that, which is great. And then we did end up spending a lot of it. Our reserves now are really slightly less than the recommended, so I try and keep things a lot tighter. But we're budgeting better now because we know more. We've got all these working groups. We've got loads. We've got S106 working group, town hall frontage or refurbishment working group, the community event working group, placemaking working group. So we've got it together a lot more now, and we are budgeting going forward. But yes, we did have to tap into our reserves, but we're quite a big council compared to some of you, so we did have that ability. We would have got a loan if we'd had to, but we didn't, so that was good.
Thank you.
Paul Egan has.
Right, first of all, budget making season is coming along. External audit awaits. So what do you need to do when you're budgeting? Well, first of all, the council needs to approve the budget for the council, not a committee. They can look at it, but the council must approve it. You also need to establish your precept, but in doing so, you must look at your reserves. That's part and parcel of the process. So when you're doing that, you need to have a projected outturn for the current year, so you can establish, if you like, as best you can, what the remaining balance will be at the end of the year, including unearmarked reserves, that's the general reserve, and those which you've earmarked. You need then to look at those unearmarked reserves and review the ring fence ones as well. And you need to work on the basis of the guidance given in the Governance and Practitioners Guide 2019, and see whether or not they're between 25% and 100% of your annual budgeted income. Okay, if they're within that range, that's fine. But on the other hand, if they're over that range, 100%, if they're 150%, and that 50% comprises mostly general reserves, you should look at taking some of that and putting it into a contribution from reserves into the budget. That will help you reduce the precept, but also it won't decrease your spending power because you'll show it as a budget income line. So that's important that you do that. You may find you don't want to transfer anything from the general reserve. The other thing is, what I think some councils do is they think about how they're going to sell any increase in the precept to their local community or town. And I think it's about involving people where it's appropriate, if there's going to be a big increase, about community engagement. But it's also about sharing information, explaining why a precept increase is being approved. Don't necessarily say it's going up by 30%. That raises the alarm bells. That's when you get the criticism on social media. Because actually, for a smaller council, 30% could mean 25 pence a week. So why don't you say 25 pence a week is the increase? Sounds better, doesn't it? And also, when you set that precept, be clear that you have the legal powers to do some of the new things that you would like to do. Organising events, that's very clear. There's a specific power in the Local Government Act 1972. But for other things, it's less clear. And I did do an inquiry yesterday, and I'll share this with you, and I'll shut up then. A council asked me whether or not they could incur expenditure on providing meals for people in the community. And the answer from our solicitors was, you can't just do that. If you do it using Section 137, you've got the financial limit. But if you're selling meals, you can't deduct the income from the expenditure. You have to base it on the gross expenditure. But the way of getting around that is if you can build in some social activity into the centre where you're selling those meals, if that's what you want to do, then you can use the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976, providing you build in a social activity. Right? So if you have older people coming in, maybe younger people, buying meals at a very realistic price in a warm hub environment, then actually you could say, we'll bring in bingo, may have a quiz, that's a social activity. Therefore, you can rely on the 1976 Act and the Section 137 financial limit. Certainly the clerks who are here will know about, wouldn't apply because there's a specific power there without any financial limit. I think one thing I'd suggest you do is have a look at the Chepstow Town Council website. It actually shows for all the share of their total spending for the year, what they're spending on each activity they provide for the community, every service and facility. It's a good way of showing it. And I think all councils should have a look at that as a good model for explaining how we spend your money and what benefits you're getting, itemized by each of those benefits you're providing. I'll stop there.
David.
I'll ask it anyway. If you're in a situation where you've put money aside in year one for a special project, then you unexpectedly get a lot of third-party grant funding. So you got to the end of year two and you haven't spent it. Do you need to, and you don't want it in your reserves, is there a preferred way of using that money?
Yeah, you could say, right, it's no longer an earmarked project because we've got the money from somewhere else. So the money you'd set aside for that, you can transfer that into your general reserve, i.e. the earmarked fund. And then you could say, well, if it's not over 100% of your gross annual income, then you could say, well, we'll leave it there. But on the other hand, if it takes you over the 100, what you need to do is in the budget you create, you can put an extra line in there saying contribution from reserves, say 20,000. And that means then you don't need to increase the precept to support your planned expenditure by an extra 20,000 because you're taking it from reserves.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, yes, that's obvious. Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Yeah.
Any more questions for Paul? And thanks very much to Cathy as well for that presentation. Mike.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the changing role of our sector. We've been around for quite a long time, and the world around us is changing rapidly. The mess that the government has got us in will take years and years and years to get out of. The impact of that is that services will be a struggle. Public services, and it doesn't matter who delivers them, are going to be a huge, huge challenge. We're in a situation where the need is growing, and it's not just because of cost of living. The very fact that we're all living longer, but not necessarily better, puts a lot of pressure on public services. Cost of living is going to continue to be with us for quite a while. So those increased demands at a time when the public purse is shrinking is introducing changes in our communities that everybody has to respond to, including our sector. We call it the cost of living crisis. It's a bit more than that, because cost of living has arrived fairly sharply, and although inflation has gone down, prices are still extremely high. So what are we doing about that? A lot of councils are responding to that, and a lot of councils are looking at what they can do to help the most vulnerable, help those that are going through the most difficulties in their community. Some councils are not in a position to do that. Larger councils are better placed to carry out a number of services. More importantly, to enter into discussions with the county council about what can be taken up by the town or community council that the unitary authority can no longer afford to deliver. How do we change the mindset, thinking, the culture of councils that meet, talk, and are a bit reluctant to do very much because it costs a lot? They're concerned about increasing the precept, the impact it will have on families, and the impact it will have on people who vote for them. That's got to change, and we've got to find ways around that. There's a lot of funding out there. Funders are still active, and councils have been very, very slow in turning to funders. We've got to increase our understanding of what additional help is available out there and how we can best use it to respond to the needs in our community. We've got to change our mindset and change our way of operating. And we've got to reduce the fear of raising precept. And people are asking, how do you handle raising precept in your community? Well, it's quite simple, actually. Talk to your community. What we've done in my council is we created a 5-year strategic plan. Share that with your community, get them to buy into it, explain to them what it would mean to the precept. Talk to the people, communicate, ask them what they want, adjust your plans so that you're working with them and not being afraid of them in what you're proposing to do. Understand what funding is available. Awards for all from the lottery, up to £20,000, very quick, very simple process. And you qualify to go for that. Events are important because they have an impact on the happiness of a community, but that's not enough. Council just delivering events is not enough when your community is going through hell. So it's about changing our mindset, finding the resources to increase our ability to respond to the needs in our community. But the thing I want to leave you with is this: master the art of achieving through others. If a council thinks that they're going to do everything in that community themselves, they become the weakest link in that community, because you're limiting what is delivered to that community to your ability to deal with it. When you achieve the art of partnership working and achieving through others, you have multiplied your impact by 100%. We do Meals on Wheels as a council. We give fresh fruit during school holidays to every kid in our community. We also do a lot of other things by helping local organizations deliver them. We do that increasingly, and that improves the quality of life in our community. So change your mindsets. The world is changing. The direction of travel that we're being taken through is changing. And those councils that continue to do very little are adding to the argument that we shouldn't exist. Just bear that in mind. Thank you. Difficult to ask
David.
questions when I'm on lecture mode, isn't it?
David has a question. Hi, David.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I think one of the questions a short while ago, I think the councillor or the clerk was, I think what she was trying to ask was, how do I get councillors motivated rather than the community? And you've got your 12 councillors and three of them doing all the work and 9 of them sort of sitting back. It changed the mindset. Came in a year and a half ago, and I've done culture change in like businesses throughout my career. And we had one of the great weapons you have in the private sector is you can incentivize people either positive or negative by sacking them or giving them bonuses. And you can't do anything in this sector. You know, as long as someone comes along once in every 6 months, that seems to be enough. There's no compulsory training. It's very, very frustrating. And the strategy I'm adopting is to basically make the environment quite toxic for people who don't want to put the effort in, and making sure we follow every damn rule and regulation and go in, and stop all the freewheeling, shooting from the hip, and just general chit chat. I'd love to know what other people are doing. We're making progress. We've still got some way to go. We've got about half the council active now, which is great.
David, there's a couple of things that you could try. I believe the way to change mindset is to use the community to do it for you. The more you engage with the community, the more the community communicates to your councillors what it needs, what it wants, the more they'll change their thinking. If you don't communicate with your community, then you're closed in a little bubble and the mindset is very difficult to change. The other thing is to get to let them know what other councils are doing. Get people from other councils to come and talk to you. Get people to come and as a guest to speak to you about what is possible and what others are doing. But I do appreciate how difficult a task it is.
Mm-hmm. Can I just say, I use the phrase, you've been living in a scrutiny-free bubble for the last 10 years, and that's changing. That seemed to scare quite a few people.
Yep.
Okay, a couple more hands up. I've missed the order, so apologies. Kim Broom.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think the challenge for the review of the town and community councils is quite important. Unless we shout about what we actually do and show what we're doing, we could end up being merged into much larger beings, which will then potentially dilute the impact that we can have in our local community for smaller ones. Some say it may be better to be in a larger one, but there's pros and cons of both, really. And change is always an issue, but there does seem to be a drive to much larger areas. When you're in a rural area, that can be quite challenging.
I agree with
Thanks,
that,
Kim.
and I think the best way to avoid government or others to looking at you and saying, well, look, it's not working, we need to change it, and the direction of travel clearly is for a smaller number of community councils being a bit larger. And to a certain extent, that's happening. We're a victim of our own success to some degree, because during COVID and during the cost of living crisis, what's happened is that the larger councils have shown what can be done. They've been absolutely amazing at the way they've responded to the needs of the community, how they've mobilized very, very quickly, especially through COVID, and how they've looked after the community, how they've managed to generate an energy at street level where neighbour looked after neighbour, where they've delivered services, where council staff were directed to deliver prescriptions to people who couldn't get out of their house. So having seen all what could be done by the larger councils that had the resources to be able to do that, then the question being asked in their mind is, well, if we had a few more larger councils, look at what can be done. And at the moment, unitary authorities are being squeezed and can't do everything. So that's a possible answer for us. Let's have a bit more of it. So to some degree, we're a victim of our own success. The way around that is for smaller councils to start working in partnership, achieving through others. The more we do, the less they've got to point fingers at. And if councils are carrying on not doing very much with the old mindset of, oh, you know, let's just volunteer and do things ourselves and not increase our staff and not worry about that. That's not our problem. That's somebody else's problem. Then the more ammunition we're giving to the critics that want to change us.
Okay, Mike, I'd like to challenge you that saying on smaller councils didn't do that. We did that and more. We picked up prescriptions.
Oh, some of you did brilliant. Don't get me wrong, Kim. I'm not accusing. I'm not pointing the finger at all small councils.
Yeah, I'm just pointing out that smaller councils also did a lot of what the larger councils did without the staffing. You know, that was there and logistically did do a vast amount. The whole sector itself did a vast amount over COVID. So I don't think we can necessarily sort of paint. Larger councils did have access to things to set up food banks and things as grants, but you know, smaller councils also did a vast amount of work during COVID. So I think the challenge will be on to actually show what's being done within all councils to and to shout about it. And One Voice Wales can help with that, because I think primarily it's audit that is driving this, and on a basis of, you know, you didn't send a form in saying you didn't claim anything, and therefore you've got an opinion, a negative audited opinion, when you know it's there are levels, and that's not one of them that should be counted.
No, I agree, and please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I wasn't saying that smaller councils didn't do anything. What I'm saying is the perception out there is the bigger councils did more, and therefore maybe we should have a few more bigger councils. And that's I don't agree with that, but that's the perception that we're fighting.
Well, this is what we need to challenge, really.
Okay, thanks, Evan. I know that there are other people with their hands up, but I would really like to finish by circling back to the topic that we wanted to focus on, because we've got Steve Edwards here with us from Abertillery and Llanhilleth Community Council, and they've had a significant increase in their Precept over the years, and I wanted just to be able to bring Steve in to share that with you, because I think it's really important research and activity they've done around community engagement around that. Steve, could I just bring you in?
I've been at this council since 2016, first as deputy clerk. I was interim clerk for 6 months in 2021, sorry, and I've been full-time clerk now since August 2023. So we've been on quite a journey since I first got here. So in 2016, budget was around 91,000. And as you can see, our budget now is increased up to 431,000. So yeah, what sort of happened is there was a major leap in 2019. That was the first double up. And that was for one specific project to deal with engagement with the youth in our area. And that came onto the back of a paper survey when we had about 150 responses from the community, basically, with the majority, an overwhelming majority, saying something had to be done with antisocial behaviour. So we picked a project that we started to support. What was interesting, and I've heard a lot around mindset, was at that point, and it seemed to be the trigger, councillors got used to dealing with large figures, large numbers. So they started to be less squeamish around projects that were coming in at £10,000 or £15,000. And as you can see over the succeeding years, we've gradually built the budget up now to where it's 431. We're going through our budget setting phase at the moment, and I'll just talk a little bit about that in a minute. But it looks like the draft budget going up for council in January is going to be closing in on 490,000. What this has meant internally in council is that all our governance and our procedures have had to start to become very more rigid and very more process driven. The first budget that I was involved setting would have been the 2017 budget. And basically, it was the Clerk RFO putting up 2 sides of A4 for the January meeting. Now we have a complete process where the committees will put their draft budgets together. That will go to a finance committee who then look at 2 things: the value for money and what they call the doability. So how quick the people putting up the draft monies for various projects, can they actually achieve what they're going for? Finance committee then makes its recommendation to full council, and we have a full council meeting the second Wednesday back in January to discuss and agree the overall budget and then what the precept. What you will see is that our precept levels over the last few years has been significantly under our budget. This is because we've had a number of issues of underspending. So that's again why we're tightening up on, again, that word doability from various people. But what we've also done, any underspend from a previous year, we've then taken it off the precept for the next year. In line with all the governance and procedures, we've also increased our staff now. So when I was first here in 2016, we had 50 hours of staff resources. We've now got 90 spread across 3 staff. We try as much as we can to not directly manage events ourselves, but help partnership groups to manage events or various other things that they do. However, we do directly manage 3 events here now. We do a lot of grant funding, fair amount of our budget, and we'll cover this, £120,000 of our budget goes to fund 6 detached youth workers across our whole community area. And we do get the arguments about double taxation, and it's what the borough council should be really doing. But the counter argument is borough council isn't doing it and isn't likely to do it. So if we want to have these services, then we have to find a way to pay and fund it for it. Part of the arguments we've used over the years for the rises in the precept is we have a large number of band A and B properties in our area. So literally the actual increase is pennies per week per property. And again, what's been alluded to before, major criticism we get is 3 or 4 people on social media. And part of our argument back is, 1, we're quite transparent about answering them about where the money's going. And 2, we always hold a couple of council vacancies, and we argue that if you want to make those decisions or help make decisions, come be a councillor. We've also benefited, and I've heard a bit about mindset of councillors as well, especially since the last elections in 2022. The demographic of our councillors got younger, and these are people also involved in community groups. So they're coming onto council to actually want to do something. And again, that's led to the increase of budgets and drafts, because you very rarely get anything for free these days. So these people who come in and want to do something, we're there to support them.
Thanks very much, Steve. Any questions for Steve?
will say, if anybody emails us direct, we're quite happy to talk them a bit more through the individual bits of our budget or our entire budget process.
That's great. Thanks very much, Steve, for joining us and making such a great contribution. I'm sure if
one last thing I would say, and I've heard this from some is use your internal auditor as a critical friend. He's not there as the enemy to be, but they're there to help you and to navigate some of the governance issues you may have.
That's great. Thanks, Steve. Thank you to you all for attending today and for all our sort of councils who've made presentations and contributions. We hope that you found it productive and that the ideas shared today highlight the power of collaborative sessions like this. And we hope it helps us all find innovative ways to address common challenges. We'd really like to keep the conversation going, so we run events like this on a regular basis around a whole raft of topics. So keep an eye on your emails and via our Facebook group. The link to that is in the chat if you'd like to join that. And if you aren't receiving updates and invites to our events, then do let us know via the admin email address, and we can make sure that you're invited to things. There's been a lot of interest in this session, and I'm really keen to capture people's motivations for attending the session today, and whether we've met your expectations around that, and if we haven't, what they were, because we'd like to follow up with resources and potentially other sessions that can further develop this subject and give you opportunities to ask those questions and explore those issues. So do get in touch with us. Are there any other questions or issues that the remaining people with us today want to raise? I know there's been a big focus on Precept, but I mean, we're already aware of lots of councils who are creatively funding initiatives and projects and services by collaborating with other projects. So we haven't really touched on that today. So that's an area that we could look at in greater detail. Again, just really using those feedback mechanisms to let us know what you need from us, so that we can provide resources and sessions like this that can give you the maximum amount of benefit. I'm just having a look in the chat. Nothing. Oh, Sean's got a hand up. Hi, Sean.
Sorry about my camera. Internet's not great today.
No, sorry, it's fine.
I just wanted to say, I mean, I came on here today. I'm town and county councillor as well, fairly new, but we sort of come to a stalemate, because everything that gets brought to us from the county, our councillors push back and say, no, it's your responsibility, not ours. And we then get stuck in the middle and we don't achieve anything. And I think it's really important if councillors had some kind of session like today, or even in written form, where they can read and see what other councils do, and that they accept that this is the way forward and we just have to take these things on. Because as just tend to say that it's the county's responsibility, and just because they haven't got any money, they shouldn't push them on us. And we sort of go backwards and forwards over a long period of time before decisions get made. So I think it would be really beneficial if they saw what other councils, town councils, community councils are quite happy to take these things on, and just say, you know, if we want them in our communities, we should be happy to do so, rather than have nothing. Thanks.
What resources do you suggest that we could develop that could support that?
To be honest, I don't know. If I bring something up in the county, who are really struggling at the moment, so everything's on hold, and then I bring something up in the town, and it goes backwards and forwards, and 2 years later we can be in the same position where nobody will take it on. And it's really difficult for our town councillors to get them to accept that it's not going to happen any other way. So if the town doesn't take it on, the county aren't going to deal with it. And I think there's some really good town councillors in our area who accept that and do take it on, and they benefit, whereas we are starting to lose out, I feel, in our community.
Okay. Carrie, you've got your hand up.
I think it was just to come back in and say that that was kind of where Mike's genuine inspirational speech that really struck me, was to go back to your community potentially. And I don't like doing it, but is there a way sometimes to just shame your council into doing it in some way, shape or form, by going back to the community and saying something along the lines of, we've got these opportunities, what would you like us to do as a questionnaire or something similar? Because there is an awful lot of power in that. And even if that comes to nothing, if your council then changes in 2 years or 3 years or whenever, you've still got that evidence base from when you did those consultations or questionnaires or similar, so you can use those again later on. So it wouldn't be a completely fruitless exercise, and it might just be the beginning spark of something to say to your council, hang on, this is what's actually expected of us. Sorry, that was my...
No, I think you make really good points, Carrie. David, did you have something to add?
Yeah, it was on this transfer of responsibilities between the sort of unitary and the town and community councils. Here in Conwy, we're expecting a letter from Conwy Borough Council this week with asks for what we can contribute, in inverted commas, towards various activities and facilities. The problem some of us have noticed is that the costings that the unitary councils use are just weird. And if they say, well, you know, £10,000 to run your playground, so well, actually we'll do it for 500, but so we're not going to give you 5,000 for it. And they're just working off a completely different cost base to us. I'm just wondering how other people are tackling that. And I have heard from other councils as well, they have similar things, and it's going to be a lot of backwards and forwards. So I just wonder how other people are dealing with that.
Vanessa?
Sorry, I just noticed in the chat as well, Larry Maskell from Cardigan, she's put the similar issue in, because I know in Ceredigion County Council they're looking to have all the toilets taken over there. So maybe, you know, Larry's saying that she's got the same issue with receiving figures from the local authority that are inconsistent and a bit sketchy, and that it's difficult to predict those sort of future costs on the council before committing to taking things on. So I don't know whether any other councils have got experience of that.
Don't seem to be. I think these are all things that we need to record and take forward and try to get answers on. But I can see that we've got a few other hands up. Mike Caddy's got his hand up.
Hello, yes, Penart.
Hi.
There are a couple of things which haven't come up, I think, in today's session. One is sort of a community engagement facility, which I tried to sort of develop when I was chair of One Voice Wales a couple of years ago, was participatory budgeting. If you want to engage your community, there's something better than, you know, saying, well, this is the problem, it's going to cost this much money, what do you feel? There have been a few pilot exercises. I think Pennard Community Council did it some time ago, small amounts of money, with the community left to decide, you know, what they want to do with it. So it seems to me something which could be expanded. I was at the Hay Festival, and there were a couple of researchers from, I think, Abertillery University, which are looking at this, and I also chair the policy committee of One Voice Wales. I thought I was going to get them along to try and discuss this issue. Hasn't come up today.
Yeah.
The second issue is that we should look to England. in terms of what's happening there. There are a lot of Southwest councils are going to unitary status, and in doing that, there is the issue of the transfer to unitary status, and what especially larger councils can do in relation to that, and the fact there's the cost of living crisis, or the financial crisis in councils, and what's happening there is that councils in Somerset, it is an ongoing thing. Councils are taking on quite a lot of the minor projects. Now, I haven't looked into it closely enough. I don't know how the money and resources are being divvied out, but there seems to be quite a lot of movement in terms of taking on responsibilities especially in the councils in the southwest. Cornwall is well known as a unitary, which I think went unitary early 2000, which is developed a relationship with its principal council, which One Voice Wales often looks at. But there are other councils. There's Dorchester, or Dorset is looking at it. Somerset's going through this, and Devon is looking to, in developing its unitary argument for the councils, parish councils and town councils to take on more things. I haven't looked into it closely enough to see what's happening, but I suspect, and I know in Bridgewater's case, there's a huge change in Precept on the part of Bridgewater. I don't know how they've managed to sort of persuade the local community to go along with it, but that's what's happening. And we should sort of look at England for a bit, especially the southwest.
That's great. Thanks, Mike.
I've got to say, thanks.
Thank you. Larry.
Hi, yes, sorry. I thought I'd better contribute, seeing that Vanessa picked up on my point. I think the problem with unitary councils are they have one huge bill, so they've split them across the board in Ceredigion, but it doesn't make sense. So instead of using the unitary council as the provider, we're actually opted to do the asset transfer and hoping that it'll be slightly cheaper our own way. But it'll be the first year will be the learning curve, and if we get it wrong, it could be a bit of a disaster, and we'd have to fall back on the option of closing them until the next budget. But it is a problem, and it's the public conveniences that are causing us a problem here in Cardigan, as well as the green spaces. They're giving them back as well. So it's a huge increase in cost, a huge increase in workload for the clerk. So I'll have to be arguing for another clerk or an increase in hours and somebody to do the toilets, the green, it all adds up. And at the end of the day, there's not a product or an activity. It's just keeping these services going. So I'm definitely going to go down encouraging the councillors to do the public consultation route, see if people are on board with it.
Thanks, Larry. Just to say that I did mention earlier, we do have our Facebook group, which is sort of an extension of this idea of bringing you all together to collectively discuss issues and problems amongst one another. And we chose Facebook because it's the most accessible for people, really. We do have a link in the chat, so there are opportunities to have this kind of dialogue on a more regular basis specifically around cost of living issues. So do come and join us there if you're able. And again, I think we'll conclude there if everybody's okay with that, and just to extend my thanks to you all again for attending this morning and making it such a productive session. We hope to see you again soon. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye now.
Thanks very much.